Input-output organization. Kernels. Accessing an I/O device, how to access an input-output device, and mode of data transfer. The data can be transferred from the processor or the memory from an input-output to an input-output device in three techniques, that is programmed I/O, interrupt-driven, and direct memory access. And the last one is buses, that is we have synchronous data transfer and asynchronous data transfer. First one, that is input-output system. One of the basic features of a computer system is its ability to exchange data with other devices. That is, data is transferred between the processor, the memory, and the other devices, external devices connected to the system. So I/O device means other external input or output device that is connected to the system. It's called the I/O device. For example, we are connecting the scanner, the printer, etc. are the I/O devices that will be connected to the system. So I/O input-output system is an integral part of a computer system. The function of input-output system is to allow communication between the computer system and its environment. A general-purpose computer should have the ability to exchange information with a wide range of devices in varying environments. So this is an I/O system, that is processor and memory. Many I/O devices are connected to the processor and the memory. It will be connected through the bus. So here is a common bus that connects the I/O devices, and n number of I/O devices connected through the bus to the processor and the memory. So multiple devices may be connected to the processor and the memory via bus. So this bus contains three lines, that is address line, data line, and control line. So each input-output device is assigned with a unique address. To access an I/O device, the processor will place the address on the address line. So address of that I/O device on the address line. The device recognizes the address and respond to the control signal. So all the devices are connected to the bus. The processor will place the address of which device the processor needs to access. So for example, if the processor needs to access the printer. Printer is an I/O device that is connected to the processor via bus. So the processor will place the address of the printer on the bus, and the printer will respond to it by sending the control signals. So accessing I/O device, the I/O device and the memory may share the same address space. So we know that the memory is connected to the processor and the I/O device is connected to the processor. For each memory location, we have different address spaces. So the same address space is used to address the memory and the I/O device. That is called memory mapped I/O. Any machine instruction that can access memory can be used to transfer data to or from the I/O device. This is a simpler software. And the second one, that is I/O mapped I/O, that is the input-output device and the memory have different address space. This is called I/O mapped I/O. Special instructions to transfer data to and from the I/O device. So for memory, to transfer between the memory, we use different instruction, and to transfer from an I/O device, we use different instruction in this case. I/O device may have to deal with fewer address lines. So I/O address lines need to be physically separated from the memory address lines. In fact, address lines may be shared between I/O device and memory with a control signal to indicate whether it is a memory address or an I/O address. So this is I/O interface, that is input-output interface. We already discussed that the bus contains three lines, the address lines, data line, and control line. So it is connected to an I/O interface. So this is the I/O device, or an input or output device is shown an input device. The input device is connected to the bus through an I/O interface. The I/O interface contains an address decoder, a control circuit, and data and status register. I/O device is connected to the bus using an I/O interface circuit which has address decoder, control circuit, and data and status register. So the function of address decoder is to decode the address placed on the address line, thus enabling the device to recognize its address. And data register holds the data that being transferred to and from the processor. And status register holds the information necessary for the operation of IO device. And data and status register are connected to the data line and have a unique address. And control circuit coordinates the input-output transfer. So control signal will be placed in the control circuit. It coordinates the transfer. Data and status register, it holds the data and status signals, and it will be connected to the data line. Control circuit will be connected to the control line. And this is the address decoder. Here you can see that the address is placed by the processor to the address decoder, and it's a single unidirectional, and these two are bidirectional. That is, control signals will be transferred to and from the IO device, and data also transferred to and from the IO device. So this is an input device is connected here. So here only the input signal is given here. So accessing IO device, three techniques to access the IO device. That is program control, that is the polling method, and the one is interrupt driven, and the third one is direct memory access. Mode of data transfer, we recall that the rate of transfer to and from the input-output device is slower than the speed of the processor. So this creates the need for mechanism to synchronize data transfer between them. The first one is program controlled IO, that is the polling method. That means the processor repeatedly monitors the status flag to achieve the necessary synchronization. The processor polls the IO device. Two other mechanisms used for synchronizing data transfer between the processor and the memory, that is interrupt driven and direct memory access. So here the first one, that is the polling method. Polling method means the processor continuously monitors all the IO devices. So when an IO device would like to transfer a data, or if an input device would like to input a data, the input status register in the input device will indicates a bit with the shows that flag bit, which shows that the input device need to input a data. So the processor repeatedly checks the status register of all the IO devices that is connected to the processor. So this method is called the polling method. It monitors one after the other. It monitors, but it is very slow process, because when a third device is need to access the processor, then to input a data, the processor first checks the first device. If it doesn't want to input a data, then it checks the second device, and the second device is also no need to doesn't want the status shows that it doesn't want to input a data. Then the processor goes to the third device. So this we are writing a program to continuously monitor the status register of each input device that is connected to the processor. So this is an example, that is the processor is connected to the bus, and two input device, that is keyboard and display, is connected to the processor. So here we have the data register and the status register. If keyboard needs to, if we want to enter any key number using the keyboard will shows the status register in the keyboard will shows that the keyboard needs to input the data. So when the processor comes and polls the keyboard, when in a programmed pattern, the processor comes and checks the status register of each IO devices that is connected to the processor. So when the processor comes and checks the status register of the keyboard, it shows that the keyboard needs to input the data. Then only the data is input. The processor takes the data from the keyboard. The processor periodically checking the status bit to see if it is time for the next input-output operation. It's called polling. Polling is the simplest way for an IO device to communicate with the processor. The IO device simply puts the information in the status register, and the processor must come and get the information. The processor is totally in control and does all the work. So the disadvantage of polling is that it can waste a lot of processor time, because processors are so much faster than IO devices. The processor may read the status register many times only to find that the device has not yet completed a comparatively slow I/O operation, or that the mouse has not bugged since the last time it was powered. When an I/O device completes an operation, we must still read the status to determine whether the I/O was successful. That is, means the input-output operation was successful. The next one is the interrupt-driven. So the overhead in a polling interface leads to the invention of interrupts to notify the processor when an I/O device requires the attention from the processor. Interrupt-driven input-output employs I/O input-output interrupts to indicate to the processor that an I/O device needs the attention. When an I/O device wants to notify the processor that it has completed some operation or needs attention, it causes the processor to be interrupted. So that means all the devices will be connected to the processor, and which device needs to do a data transfer, it will interrupt the processor. So many devices, n number of devices will be connected to the processor, and if the nth device want to communicate with the processor, it will generate an interrupt. Then the processor will be notified that the nth device need to communicate with the processor, or it needs to transfer data with the memory or the processor. In program controlled input output, when the processor continuously monitors the status of the device, it does not perform any useful task. An alternative approach would be for the I/O device to alter the processor when it becomes ready. This is done so by sending a hardware signal called an interrupt to the processor. So at least one of the bus control lines called an interrupt request line is dedicated for this purpose. Processor can perform other useful tasks while it is waiting for the device to be ready. So when the processor executes an instruction located at the address I, so this is at the address I, when the processor was executing this instruction, routine executed in response to when an interrupt occurs, and when an interrupt occurs, the interrupt service routine will be executed. So the routine executed in response to an interrupt request is called interrupt service routine. When an interrupt occurs, the control must be transferred to the interrupt service routine. So when interrupt occurs, the control will be here. When the processor is executing this program, at this ith instruction an interrupt occurs and the control will be transferred to ISR. So ISR will be placed in a different location, and the processor goes to that location and will execute the instruction specified in that location. So that is the interrupt service routine. So but before transferring the control, the content of the program counter, that is the next instruction to be executed, that is I plus 1. So when executing the ith instruction, interrupt occurs. So after coming back from the interrupt, the processor needs to execute the instruction I plus 1 in the location I plus 1. So this must be saved to a non-location. Usually we are saving to the stack. So the return address or the content of the PC is usually stored on the processor stack. So after completing this set of instruction, that is ISR, the processor can come back to the processor will pop from the stack to the program counter and should come back to this instruction. Saving and restoring of information can be done automatically by the processor or explicitly by program instruction. So saving and restoring registers involves memory transfer that increases total execution time. Some registers will be used while using the interrupt service routine. So not only the program counter value, we need to store the flag registers So some of the flag registers will be altered while executing the interrupt service routine, and also